Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. Pleased to be back in the land of the no state income tax.
Yeah.
Oh, but the trip last week, that was incredible.
It was fantastic.
It really was. If you didn't see last week's FAIRtax Power Radio, go back and look at the last episode. That's the one that we recorded as we were broadcasting live on WTOB last Sunday, July 5th. Finally got to meet Bob Scarborough. What a great guy.
Yeah.
And a good, solid FAIRtax supporter as well.
Oh, how many FAIRtax supporters have actually been able to land us positions on various radio stations? And if you saw last week's episode, you heard the big announcement that not only are we on WTOB in Winston-Salem, but he secured positions on WAME in Statesville, Real Country, and on WLSC in South Carolina, Loris, South Carolina. All three of these stations are running the FAIRtax Guys on Sunday morning at various times, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, so forth. But we're getting out there.
But I was glad to hear Bob say that this was an easy sell to radio stations.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm, on a personal note too, I was very pleased when he said, you guys do a good show that's entertaining and informative. And, I appreciate hearing that because I think we're entertaining and informative, but
we try.
But what do I know? I'm a retired high school teacher, so it was nice to hear somebody else, somebody who's in the business, say that, and we truly appreciate his efforts to get us on those stations. And he talked about talking to one fellow who has a network of 200 stations.
Something like that. We'll work on that.
So, that's... Whew.
And I was happy to talk to the lady who's the state director for North Carolina. I had not met her. I didn't even recognize her name before.
Laura McHugh. Yep. She called in as because it was a call-in show, all right? It was good. A friend of Mr. Scarborough's called in. He seemed to have the flat tax and the FAIRtax confused a little bit, but that's very common.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, I didn't know that several of our FAIRtax people would be calling and kind of setting up questions for us. Adam Yomtoff and Jim Bennett called, and I was kind of having a little fun with Bennett, and somebody texted that, does he know who he's talking to? Yes, I know who I was
we knew
talking
exactly who it was. Yeah. So.
Well, that's enough reminiscing of what was a wonderful trip. Hopefully we can do that again at least maybe next year around the 4th of July. But we need to press on with our FAIRtax Power Radio. And again, this being the first episode of a new recording session, Congress.gov.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, there are some goodies in here this time around. Now, let me find. I'm going to save the best one for last too. But there's this was introduced a few days ago. On the 9th, today is the 10th, so this was just introduced yesterday. H.R. 7548 to amend Title 41 United States Code and the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to get this, to ensure the availability of personal protective equipment during pandemics and other public health emergencies through stockpile requirements and domestic manufacturing incentives and for other purposes. Now, question, why is the Internal Revenue Code imposing stockpile requirements for anything, any commodity, for any reason?
I mean, isn't that happening already? I mean,
isn't that something that responsible people are going to do anyway?
Yeah. And since we've been through this, we know what to expect the next time a pandemic comes from China. And so they're doing it. The government is doing it. The task force that the president set up, they're doing this type of thing, and we're good. So the question begs the question: why do we need to put that in the tax code when we're already doing it?
Okay. Well, here are the three key words that leaped out at me: domestic manufacturing incentives. If you want to have domestic manufacturing incentives, stop taxing the domestic manufacturers.
There you go.
That would work. Tell people, if you want to come to the United States, and whether you're manufacturing masks or cars or airplanes or yachts or whatever, if you're manufacturing anything, come to the United States. You will pay no federal income tax. You will not need an army of accountants and lawyers to keep your can out of jail for running afoul of a complex tax code. It's just not there. Come here, do business, let the retail consumer pay the taxes, which he does anyway. Because the taxes that are imposed on a business are rolled into the cost of their products and services. So just get rid of all the garbage. Let people come here, do business unfettered. The prices will go way down because the cost of business goes way down. Then when the tax is added at the retail end, it becomes almost a wash. So there we go. If you want to ensure domestic manufacturing incentives, quit taxing the domestic manufacturers.
By the way, I looked up, I believe right now it says there's 1,741 proposals for the tax code, and it's kind of hard to figure because I'm not exactly sure when Congress has been in session, but according to their original schedule, they've been in session 197 days as of today, and that's 8.8 proposals per day to make the tax code more complicated than it already is with foolish stuff like this.
Okay, now this one could hit home. The Americans for Fair Taxation, the national grassroots group, is a 501c4.
That's right.
And H.R. 7525, introduced yesterday again, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to prohibit 501c4 entities from using more than 10% of total expenditures on certain political expenditures and for other purposes. So they're going to try to use the tax code to regulate what you can spend.
And it says certain political expenditures as defined by the geniuses inside the Beltway in Washington.
Well, unfortunately, there was no text published with that thing, and that was introduced just yesterday, so it's too new to have the text published. But anyway, the Internal Revenue Code is messing with the 501c4s. We'll definitely keep an eye on that one. Now, here's another one. All right, now, H.R. 7505, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to promote new business innovation and for other purposes.
Again.
All right? If you want to promote business innovation, stop taxing it.
It's very simple.
That's real easy.
It may be too simple for our friends in Washington.
Well, that one came from Vern Buchanan right here in Florida. Who, if I'm not mistaken, he was at one time on the Ways and Means Committee. I assume he still is.
I'm not sure.
But anyway.
I know that we have not been able to get him to co-sponsor the FAIRtax.
Yes,
he's a fence sitter.
He wants to promote new business innovation. Vern, stop taxing it. Get rid of all that stuff. And
get to the good one.
Tax. We got one more really good one down here I got to dig to. This is S4104, the Stopping Improper Payments to Deceased Peoples Act.
I can't believe it.
Now, let me ask you a question. What is a proper payment to a deceased person? I don't know. So that tells you the IRS is sending refunds to dead people, and they're no telling what else is in there. That one does not specifically mention the Internal Revenue Code, but that one just brought up the fact that the government bureaucracy is so large, it's so cumbersome, it's so out of control that stuff happens. We have had cases where the IRS was sending literally hundreds of refunds to the same address.
That's right.
Different people all at the same address. So there's all kinds of improper payments made to people who don't deserve them all throughout the government. And if you want to get rid of that, at least on the IRS side, get rid of the IRS.
It's very simple. I mean, because in the case of sending all these returns to the same address, it would be a pretty simple situation to get the computers to look at that. If all these refunds are going to the same address, that should raise a red flag.
It should. Okay, well, that's our Congress.gov segment for you. We've got some new candidate pledges, and you've got a Grassroots Corner. You may decide which one you want to do first.
Okay, Grassroots Corner. Let's do this quickly because this is a good one. This is from July 10th. From Jim Bennett, who's the AFFT Grassroots Director, jim.bennett at fairtax.org. Bennett has 2 N's and 2 T's. A Jacksonville preview. With the Republican convention coming to Jacksonville, Florida, here's a report from FairTaxer Jim Stair about an encounter with Vice President Mike Pence. That happened a while ago and brought surprising results. Jim writes, I attended a speech given by Mike Pence, by Vice President Mike Pence, back in May of 2019, so it was a little over a year ago. It was in Jacksonville. It was sponsored at an event sponsored by America First Policies. I spotted a fellow FAIRtaxer, several FAIRtax volunteers at the event. While wearing FAIRtax hat and shirt, I handed out FAIRtax cards until stopped by a member of the America First Policies, which just happened to be before the program began. So he got a few of them out there before being stopped. He said, Congressman Rutherford, Florida 4, Jacksonville, shook my hand as he was moving quickly to his place on the stage, and I told him that Pence was a co-sponsor when he was in the House and that we need Rutherford's co-sponsorship. All right. I think he simply said, okay, but as it turned out, Congressman Rutherford did co-sponsor the FAIRtax shortly after that, and what Jim Stair doesn't know is that after Jim Stair talked to him at this event, Paul Livingston had also set up a meeting with Congressman Rutherford, and by the time Paul's meeting came about, Congressman Rutherford was a co-sponsor, so it was uncoordinated efforts, but still it had the proper effect, and that's what this is about. Okay, you never know when a simple handshake, Congressman, we really need your support, something like that will have an effect because somebody else is giving the same message. And we know that congressmen, when they get the same message from a number of different people, their ears perk up. Okay? It
does, absolutely. So
anyways, you can get these Grassroots Corners and the FAIRtax Report and Steve Hayes' Chairman's Report by going to fairtax.org and scroll down on the first page, and there's a little place where you can sign up. You will not get spam when you sign up to get the emails at fairtax.org.
Okay, and we're pleased to report that there are some new candidates out there for Congress and the Senate who are signing the FAIRtax Candidates Pledge. If you're unfamiliar with that, it is a pledge that you can download at fairtax.org that the candidate basically says, if elected, I will co-sponsor the FAIRtax and will vote for it if it comes up. Now we got a whole long list of folks. Let's just hit the new ones this time because we've got some stuff we want to get into here, and time's getting away from us.
Okay, new is Dr. James St. George, Florida 3. He had indicated his desire to sign it the last time we talked about this, and he actually does. I checked with Randy. Mika Beckwith, who's running for Indiana 5, congressman for Indiana 5. Johnny Nalbandian, California 27. Apparently, he's our first California candidate to sign the FAIRtax Pledge, and that is thanks to Paul Gasper, a volunteer in California. And Barry Moore, Alabama 2, running for congressman in Alabama 2. And there is a list which we've gone over in previous ones, and we can't really take the time, but we have quite a list of people who have signed the FAIRtax Pledge that says that they will co-sponsor and promote the FAIRtax if elected.
So if you can go to fairtax.org, download a hard copy of this thing, put it in front of a candidate running for Congress in your district, and if you can get them to sign it in front of a camera, either still or video, doesn't matter, just take the pictures or take the video and send it to us here at the FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com. We'd love to add them to the list, and of course we're not promoting or endorsing anybody, we're just educating the public on who has signed the FAIRtax Pledge.
Well, it's interesting that here in Florida 3, where our studio is located, there seems to be some decent competition between. We have a lot of Republican candidates running for Congress in District 3 since Congressman Yoho is retiring.
This is where we've got an incumbent retiring. So
and it looks like we're going to get all of them to sign the pledge.
That works.
So that'll be good.
Let me ask you a question. When is tax filing deadline?
Tax filing deadline normally for individuals is April 15th. For corporations, it's March 15th, but this year, it's July 15th.
Which is the day after this episode is going to air.
Yeah.
So as we are speaking, there are guaranteed people out there scrambling, pulling their hair out, procrastinators, they do it every year, that are waiting until the last moment to get all of their income tax stuff put together so they can get it filed before midnight tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, I tell you what, wouldn't it be a lot easier if there were no tax returns?
Oh, how can you do that?
You can do that by getting rid of the income tax, getting rid of the requirement to file an income tax return, and replacing all that stuff with a fair tax.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, we were going to talk about Tax Freedom Day and all the evils of having to fill out tax returns, just having to disclose all of your financial information to the government is just stupid.
Tax Freedom Day, if you're not familiar with that term, is that is how many days, what day of the calendar that you have to work to pay off your federal taxes, and from there on you're actually working for yourself.
All of the money you make between the first of the year and Tax Freedom Day goes to the government.
Yeah. Last year, Tax Freedom Day was April 15th. That was 105 days into the year. They don't have it. Nobody can find it for this year because everything's up in the air.
Yeah.
So nobody knows when the Tax Freedom Day is. It may have already passed, but this year is such a mess because of the virus and everything, all the changes going on. But that's the idea. Tax Freedom Day is the day that you stop working for the federal government and you start working for yourself. Think about that.
With the fair tax, there is no Tax Freedom Day because you feed your family before you feed the government. There should be a day that figures out, at what point do you start feeding the government, and it won't be January 1st. So Tax Freedom, fair tax just flips that around on its ear. But we got a really good gift yesterday, something that we really haven't had a opportunity to dig into really deeply. But yesterday, we're recording this on July 10th on Friday. Yesterday, Thursday, the Supreme Court came out with a couple of tax-related decisions. Mm-hmm. And one of them was regarding the president's tax returns. Congress wants to get a hold of the president's tax returns. Now, they say for whatever purpose they want it for, they'll make up some kind of reason. What they really want to do is find something in there they can leak and damage him with it.
Yeah, but they went to court saying that they need it for future legislative purposes. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can understand wanting to know trends and figures over, of all Americans or Americans above a certain income level or something like that. But to say that you need one person's tax returns in order to form some legislation, that obviously the Supreme Court agreed with us. That was a bridge too far. Plus, here's the danger, folks. I mean, whatever side of the political the aisle you're on, if Congress can demand that the president turn over his or her tax returns to them for no reason at all, then they can demand it from every citizen in the country.
Yeah.
And if you say something wrong, you can find yourself with the tax returns.
Yeah, and this was two related cases. One when the congressional subpoenas for the president's tax returns. The other one was a district attorney that was working on something as well, wanting to get this. And Randy Fisher, who is an attorney, he's not quite the tax attorney that Steve Hayes is, and Steve Hayes is going to be writing a chairman's report about this that will be coming out on Friday, so we'll keep an eye on this. But the information that we've got now, Randy says the Constitution took a serious blow in the Supremacy Clause because the president's arguments against the congressional subpoenas was, I am the president, I am immune from this stuff, you can't do this to me because it's the separation thing. And the Supreme Court says, well, Mr. President, you really don't have absolute immunity all the time over everything. And so what they did, they just kicked the case back to the lower court. They really didn't decide anything. They didn't make the president turn over his tax returns, but they rejected his idea that he can keep them hidden from Congress because of, I have ultimate absolute supremacy or, exemption in this thing.
Yeah, and here's another aspect of it that for, to my simple mind, this is more important. It happens to be Article 4. Article 4 of the Bill of Rights, or the Fourth Amendment. Okay, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. So a crime has not been indicated here. They can't say, well, from the information we have, the president is doing something wrong on his taxes. For one thing, he has submitted them to the IRS. The IRS audits people like him, very wealthy people, every single year. We found that out when we went to Gainesville and talked to Tony McKnight, okay? He and his wife have been audited every year for the last 15 years. And the president's taxes get audited every year. So if there was something wrong, if he was doing something wrong, don't you think the IRS would make note of that?
Yeah, let me finish Randy's note here. He says it opens up the ability of Congress to use the legislative purpose pretext to obtain the private tax information of any member of the executive or judicial branch. Now that should scare you, because if that becomes, the way business is done when there's, the other party is in power, then this could be used. The fact that you're trying to use it against the Republican president means this could be used equally well against the Democrat president later. It's a bad idea on both sides. Don't do that. The IRS is further empowered as the control spot for release of information. Just what the IRS needs is more power. Again, neither case was a final decision. It just keeps the ball bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. I love Randy's fifth point. The amount of resources wasted in terms of preparing, seeking, and resisting the production of income tax returns is staggering and can be multiplied by making the code more complex. Not in the opinions, but implicit is the result. So I'll tell you what, the idea is a system in which these tax returns even exist to be fought over in this manner is crazy.
It is.
You need to get rid of tax returns. That's the only way you're going to get rid of politicizing tax returns. And if one side gets away with it, the other side is going to keep that in mind, and will eventually, when they get their turn, they'll use it as well.
So, and on Facebook, whenever I see somebody that insists that the president needs to turn over his tax returns, my response to them is, you first. If you think it's such a good idea, you make your tax returns public if that's a good idea, because that's what this non-decision, that's another thing. Why can't the Supreme Court actually make a decision? Okay?
Yeah, they just punted this thing back to the lower courts.
But for those people that think this person or that person, whoever, the president, the vice president, and somehow it stops at the third in line for the presidency. I'm not sure about that. So if you think it's a good idea that these people need to be forced to publish their tax returns, then you go ahead and do it.
Yeah, well, hopefully this can get the president on board with a fair tax. If we can convince him that there is a system under which the government can be fully funded, or at least funded to the same degree that it is now. It's not fully funded if you look at how much they take in versus how much they spend. But if we can have a system that brings in the same amount of revenue for the government with no tax returns, no individual has to reveal to the government anything about their personal finances. Maybe we can get the president on board with this. So I would suggest you go to whitehouse.gov/contact and say, hey, Mr. President, would you like to help us out here? You won't have it to file any more tax returns, and your political opposition can't use them against you if they don't exist in the first place.
And they can't be used against the individual. I mean, the average taxpayer. The IRS is not really a nonpartisan organization. You remember?
No, it has always been a political tool used by the party in power.
Exactly.
I mean, Nixon used it against his enemies.
That's right. Right. And Johnson did, and a number of presidents have done that.
So it is
on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, if you oppose the administration, you prepare to get audited, But so that needs the politicization of tax returns, the politicization of the IRS, all of this system. It does not have to be this way, folks.
Right.
We can get rid of this entire stinking system, still fund the government at the same level it's being funded now. And we got a message from somebody the other day that says 23% won't work because that won't cover all the spending they're doing. Well, the income tax system doesn't work for the same reason, and that's a bit of a red herring, but I wanted to mention that. But we can get rid of the income tax. We can get rid of tax returns. We can get rid of this entire corrupt, politicized system and just make it fairer and easier on everybody.
Yep. just think of what a blessing the FAIRtax will be to everybody. Not only will it be easier for you, not only will it protect the people in the lower incomes that most need the help, but it'll stop a lot of this political wrangling, which I fear the people in Congress terrified of the idea because they love this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, I tell you what, I'm hoping that we can get a little more detail on this when Steve Hayes digs into it.
Yeah.
Steve Hayes, a tax attorney who knows more about taxation than most people, he's forgotten more about taxation than most people ever knew in the first place.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see his chairman's report on this. We may revisit this and as we get some more information about this. But there's no need to revisit this idea. Tax returns, get rid of them.
Yeah.
We can and we should.
Yeah, and this is how we do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you did bring your protest sign. Defund the IRS. Why? Taxpayers matter. Okay. we got about 2.5 minutes left to do our call to action. So if you would like to see tax returns disappear so that they can never be used politically against anybody, not just the president. They could be used against you if somebody wants to do that under some of these things. So what do we do that? We get rid of the income tax. You do that by joining Americans for Fair Taxation.
Yep. Go to FAIRtax.org. FAIRtax.org. You scroll down a little bit, you'll see a place where you can input your name and information. And if the spirit moves you, donate a little bit. We are all volunteers, totally.
If you can, join the 1040 Club. Pledge $10.40 a month to get rid of Form 1040. That sounds like a really good idea. I'd like to do that. You can share these videos. We're on Facebook. We stream it live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, but of course it's there to be shared. You can share it later because they stay on the page. They're archived afterwards. Check that out. It's nice to see people that are there every week listening to the program, but I'd really like to see some new faces.
Yeah,
I'm kind of tired of preaching to the choir here.
We definitely need new people. And something that I haven't mentioned in quite a while, for our podcasts, we have free apps. You can find on your favorite app store, whether it's for iOS or Android, the FAIRtax Power Radio app. And you can download it to your mobile device, and that's a very quick way of getting our podcasts every week.
Now, and we mentioned joining the national organization, Americans for Fair Taxation. There are state-level organizations as well, and especially in Alabama and Georgia and Nebraska, where they're looking at replacing their state income tax with a consumption tax model on the FAIRtax. Help that out. You can go, if you're in North Carolina, you can talk to Laura McHugh. We'll give her another plug.
Yep, that's right. All right. And write letters to the editor, okay? You don't have to be a tax expert. You don't have to be a fair tax expert. You just have to be a loyal supporter and say, you could say, I'm still learning about this, but what I know, it sounds pretty darn good, and you all need to get on board and give them our address, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com or fairtax.org. You need to share this with other people.
Listen on WTOB, WAME, and WLSC. You can get your local stations to carry FAIRtax Power Radio as well. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thanks so much for watching and listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Providing you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So tell me, how could I pay less taxes?
Less.
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead, so how can I pay less?
Well, I suppose you could pay less taxes by earning less money, or you could give to charity.
How is that going to help?
Actually, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if you know the right people, okay, or if you have a really good lawyer, you can usually get around the big ones.
If I may. Under the fair tax, to pay less taxes, you would simply consume less. You would control how much you pay and when you pay your taxes simply by choosing what you purchase and when you purchase something.
So I could stay focused and get ahead.
Exactly.